Wobbuffet is probably the most interesting Pokemon in Gen 4 Ubers because it is entirely unique in what it does. Now, most of the staple Ubers are unique at what they do, but there is really nothing that does what Wob does. So the other Ubers are, even if they're unique in how they do it, they still generally do the same thing, right? It's some mixture of speed and resists and being able to support the team in some way, like with rocks or hazards, or having a bunch of strong attacks to fire off, or a status, or and traditional Pokemon stuff. It makes sense. Wob is not like those. It has no stab attacks. It doesn't switch into, it doesn't really have useful resists. So it doesn't, stave off Draco Meteors or anything like that. And it's not supporting the team directly through hazards and status. However, Wob is the single biggest playmaker in Ubers. Now, you could argue, well, what about something like Deoxys Speed, which gets up multiple layers of hazards and that makes all its teammates better? Yeah, okay, that's totally fine. But Wob directly forces the removal or abuse of other Pokemon, and that is irreplaceable. I mean, the closest thing that comes to Wob's trapping abilities is, of course, other trappers. And yeah, I mean, you have stuff like T-Tar and Scizor can sometimes pursuit the Laddies, and, maybe even you have a Magnezone and you trap the rare Skarmory or Jirachi, or even, Dialga in Rain. But at this, before it roars you out, assuming it's weakened and not too bulky, but that's not, none of those hold a candle to what Wob does, because it is useful against pretty much every type of team, and the only reason it's not used more is, well, it's the reason why I'm making this video. It's because I want to raise awareness of how it should be used, because it's not something you intuitively put on a team. You have to make a conscious decision. Okay, I'm using Wobbuffet because number one, to take advantage of its strengths, which are unique, but not, always the most intuitive. Because most of our intuitive Pokemon instincts are, alright, switch into attack, fire off attack. And Wobbuffet is more about, its removal and its support move pool are more about directly supporting its teammates for the long game. When you switch Dialga into Kyogre, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get a Brox, and that's going to be good throughout the game, or I'm going to get a Draco off. But that's more, we'll get a Brox now, we'll get a Draco, and we'll see where this goes from there. Pretty natural way to play the game. With Wob, you don't have to, it helps if you're consciously thinking about it, because it's so weird. It's so unlike everything else. But it switches in, and it's unbelievably forceful in removing the opposing Pokemon. So here's how it works generally. It removes both offensive and defensive Pokemon. Now, it's not, its defenses are not great, even though it has a million HP, then you're not removing a Kyogre, a Specs Kyogre locked in a Water Spout. That's not what it's supposed to do. The offensive Pokemon it removes are also generally not like setup Pokemon. You don't switch it into Lucario, for example. What you do with Wobbuffet is remove Scarfers primarily. So early in the game, when you have like a Darkrai out or something, and they're going to go to their Dialga, and they're going to Draco, because they're going to say, okay, well, this is the Draco tier, I'm going to drop a Draco, and I'm going to either KO something or chunk something, and then I'm going to switch out, my Scarf Dialga is going to come back and do it again. Or same thing with Palkia Spatial Rend, and so on and so on and so on. With Wob, then, once they Draco, I mean, you can wait until after a KO. Ideally, you don't just, sacrifice an entire Pokemon that did nothing just to remove the Scarfer. Ideally, the Scarfer's coming in after you've Dark Voided something with Darkrai, or, you've gotten up some hazards and that. You don't want to be starting, you want to already have done something by the time Wob comes in. Because that makes the impact of Wob's forced KO more significant. Because, if the first thing you're doing all game is, getting Wobbit and KOing something, that's fine if you get it completely for free, but you're generally not going to get it completely for free. It's generally going to cost you a poke because it doesn't switch into much. But by removing the Scarfer, I mean, I could end this video say, Wob removes Scarfers really easily, and every offensive Pokemon in the world loves that. The end. That is, in short, what it does. And, I mean, I don't think I have to explain too much why removing the Scarfer is good. Oh, there's no Scarfer around. Well, now my Mewtwo goes crazy. Or my Darkrai, or my Lottie, or Garchomp. All of this. And it's not just a matter of removing Scarfers. You can't exactly take advantage of Wobbuffet after a KO because it has Encore. And in Gen 4, Encore lasts a while. Yeah, it counters stuff. Now remember the type thing. Like, you can't trap Giratina Origin because if it's smart, it'll Shadow Sneak, and you can't counter it because counter's a fighting move and Giratina Origin is Ghost. So same reason you can't Mirror Coat like a Darkrai. But that's minor. For the most part, you are trapping stuff like Scarf Kyogre locked into Ice Beam, and Scarf Palks and Dialgas, and yeah. So yeah. So you remove the Scarf. That's obviously amazing, and then you prevent something from setting up on you because of Encore. And as if that wasn't enough, you still have another move slot. Now, Wob famously has a move pool of nothing, but it has two moves that are really valuable. And generally, if you have a Pursuit user, you use Tickle. If you don't have a Pursuit user, you use Safeguard. Now, both are really good. Now, seeing as Tickle requires a Pursuit user, then we're going to go with Safeguard first because it's the more generally applicable. If you want to see this in action, I recommend, I did a video in the DPP Ubers playlist that this is going to be in, called 6 Tournament Battles. And the last battle in that video is a Soulwind game where he uses Wob Safeguard to set up his Calm Mind Kyogre in the face of Toxic Spikes. And this combination has been around for a long time. Safeguard, so suddenly Will-O-Wisps and T-Waves and Toxics and Dark Voids, they're just not going to affect your pokes. And that is really, really big because status is... You know how when you run into... if you were like a scrub on the Uber's ladder because you wanted to use your favorite legendary Pokemon, that was really... No, okay. So, you know how entry hazards and passive damage are generally great because no matter how high your base stat total is, you are still going to have a type, and you are still going to be affected by the passive damage all the same. Like, yeah, you can have 1,000,000 HP and 1,000,000 defense, and you can take 2% from Specs Draco Meteor, but you're still going to take 12.5% from Leech Seed. So, where I'm going with this is that status, not just passive damage, but status of all kinds, Thunderwave's speed drop, and, Burn's attack drop, and, all the passive damage of Burn and Poison, and of course the complete shutdown of Sleep. Those are used because you can't always, the Ubers are bulky as well as strong, and so you can't always outmuscle them. So sometimes you want to status them. So suddenly what happens when you have a Safeguard Wob and you send in your leftovers Rock Polish Groudon? Suddenly that Giratina Origin can't Will-O-Wisp you anymore. You can't Toxic it. And it's same with the Calm Mind Kyogre that was mentioned already. So, and Safeguard is crucial, just like Encore is crucial, because it's not going to last forever, but the turns it does last are enough to where it can help you win the game, or at least make significant enough strides forward to win the game. As you know, if you've ever watched a video on DPP Ubers, every turn is crucial with how powerful this tier is, and that's why giving the opponent a turn to set up their dangerous threat can let them run away with the game really easily. So, and that's why so many Pokemon like Giratina Origin, it's like, oh, well, I don't have coverage for everything, and I'm at -2 with Draco, but Will-O-Wisp will keep it in check. And when you remove that, then you make it even easier to get free turns. I mean, a lot of Pokemon's movesets are geared towards not allowing free turns. So the opponent can't set up when they're vulnerable and destroy them. and status is a big part of that. And with Safeguard, you remove that and make your offensive Pokemon even more threatening. Wob is most fit on offensive teams. You can use it on defensive stuff, but I will just say it now. Where do you want to? If you've been wondering this whole time, where do I use Wob? You use it on offense. Stall doesn't really care about removing, or defensive teams, they don't really care about removing Scarfers. They welcome Scarfers. Scarfers mean free turns to set up hazards and heal your pokes up. And they don't care about Wob's ability to remove defensive pokes either, but that's something else. Offense, because you love the removal of Scarfers and Wob's ability to help remove walls, and it's a protection against status. I mean, oh no, T-Spikes wrecked my team. Oh wait, Wob? I'll let Wob take the T-Spikes, because now I Safeguard, and now I send in my Calm Mind Kyogre, and now I'm ripping through their whole team. And, what's this? Wob also comes with the benefit of potentially trapping Kyogre's Lati or Palkia, their checks in Lati or Palkia. So, yeah, Wob is great for offense. Kyogre loves Wob. A lot of Pokemon love Wob. So that's Safeguard, and now we'll get to the other move, which is Tickle. And this is simple, commonly used alongside Scizor, because Scizor also has Bullet Punch, so it's more easy to slap on a team than something like T-Tar, because Bullet Punch is more useful against things like Darkrai and Mewtwo, which even Scarftar can't outrun. But, I mean, it obviously works with T-Tar well. And so, like, the Wob, Scizor, Kyogre combo is a whale, pun intended, of a wall-breaking combination, because you have these two trap Pokemon, and then you are using these Pokemon to trap the few counters of the most dangerous Pokemon in the game. So as if it wasn't already scary enough. So with Wob, then what you do against something like Blissey is that, because like Blissey can shrug off Scizor's Bandit Pursuits because they're not stab. I mean, they're Technician boosted, but they're not stab. But with Wob, then you don't have any guessing games of, oh, is it going to stay in? Is it going to switch out? You switch it in, you encore a wall like Blissey or Lugia. I mean, if you're trying to gear up for a late game Groudon sweep, or Rayquaza, then yeah, you love removing Lugia. If Lugia switches in and it doesn't either switch out or use Whirlwind on the turn Wob comes in, it's gone. Because Wob will encore it, and even if it has Toxic, which many Lugia don't, then it gets tickled, and then Scizor removes it, and then you are, in trouble. And obviously, if it attacks, then you can just mirror code it down yourself. So, yeah, Wob removes all sorts of walls because Encore. Wob even does this against something like a support Dialga, because you can you come in as it rocks, and if it Dracos, then it's dead. And if it decides to keep rocking, so you can't mirror code it, you will at the very least get a very free, very abusable switch because it's going to be encored into Stealth Rock. And you're generally not going to want to PP stall it because of pressure, but you can also, I guess you could pair Dugtrio with it if you really wanted to be on the safe side. Tickle plus Doug sounds absolutely dirty. Hey, maybe we'll see some of that. But you can, and a lot of Dialga, they're being able to put them in a position where they're locked into Stealth Rock. It's not just getting a free switch against Dialga, because you can't necessarily just switch to Dialga as it uses Stealth Rock and chase it out. Dialga is hard to bring down. That's why it's so good. So it's not like you're going to have a free turn necessarily. When you go to Wob and you encore the support Dialga after it's used Rocks, and again, it can't get around it by using Roar because you'll go first and you'll encore it into the last move it used, which was Rocks. And when that happens, then you then get a free switch to your Calm Mind Kyogre, which is normally a Pokemon Dialga checks, right? And now Dialga has to switch out of it. So they're going to have, they still might have a Lati, but point stands, they're not always going to have a Lati, and normally you're finding free turns where you normally wouldn't. That's where Wob excels, besides just removing the Scarfers, which is already amazing, obviously. But it removes Scarfers, and it gives you free turns for the scariest Pokemon in the game. Free turns to get a free trap off on something, free turns to set up, because a lot of things like, and you might think, what about Roar? Roar will prevent setup, and it doesn't mind Safeguard. Yeah, and then, Wob uses Encore, and unless you, roared as it came in, then you're not pulling it off. So, if it's encored, then you're still going to be using a move that is then taken advantage of. And it's not like you can switch out either, because, that's why Wob is so good. Encores you into a move and then switches to something that takes advantage of that move. So, let's take the example of Groudon earthquaking. Now, in most cases, if Groudon is encored into EQ, you're going to counter and KO it, right? But what if you know that the opponent's team will lose as soon as your Rayquaza sets up a DD or an SD? Then you don't need to counter and KO it. You encore that Groudon into Earthquake, you switch to Rayquaza, and there's nothing they can do about it. Because they are forced to continue using Earthquake, and they cannot stay in on the Rayquaza as it boosts because they're locked into Earthquake. And look, Rayquaza is another classic partner. The Hoenn trio is really probably the best partners for Wob on all these offensive teams. Although, stuff like Lucario and Garchomp obviously loves it as well. But, those three are the ones that stand out most in my mind, especially Groudon and Ray. But, like these physically offensive, overwhelming teams. But yeah, that's the whole idea. Well, how do you stop Ray from setting up and destroying your team? Oh, well, you don't let it set up. Well, thanks to Wob, then you did let it set up. And before that, you're wondering, well, why is there no other Pokemon that can switch in and check Ray? Well, most of the time you're not walling Ray. Most of the time you're not packing Lugia on every team. That actually makes it even better, because if they do have a wall like Lugia, then Wob helps you get rid of that, and if their method of checking something like Ray is a Scarfer, which is very easy to draw in early in the game, then Wob removes that as well. Honestly, it's so good. The only reason it's not used more is because it feels awkward to put on a team. You have to, again, conscious decision to use it, but yeah, it's really unbelievable, the depth of support it uses. So, yeah, offensive teams, you could slap Wob on most offensive teams, and it would perform really well. Honestly, it's kind of crazy how ridiculously good it is. So, yeah, that's it. That's a simple version. So, again, watch the Solwind game, and if you need teams, again, go parsing through the other videos. Oh, here's an old RMT from August. This is a team from 2009. But it's the same idea. August team uses Safeguard Safeguard Wob, helps you get around T-Spikes and Will-O-Wisps and T-Waves and all that. And Solwind's team also used Safeguard. I don't think he had Pursuit on his. And if you want to see what Pursuit Wob looks like, then there's a video on YouTube. Look up. I think I've shown it in my... I showed it in my DPP Ubers The Greatest Metagame of All Time video. So skim through that, and there's a Wi-Fi battle in it, in which Lugia comes in and Wob tickles it, and then Scizor pursues it to death. So that's the basic idea. And where was this used? It was used on a standard Deoxys Speed Hyper Offense team. You have DOS, and then you have your Wob and your Scizor, and then you have your cleanup poke like Dialga, and then you have your offensive threats. There was probably a Kyogre in there. It didn't even get revealed, but that's the idea. It's very easy to slot Wob on a team. I know it feels weird because it's not, again, it's so non-traditional, let's say. It's not like, dishing out the big hits or really tanking the big hits super well. But once you get used to it, it's not an automatic poke that you just use as soon as you start playing Ubers. But once you've got a feel for the tier, and once you just try it out and get used to what it's like, it is really, really, it's really something. And it's actually pretty good defensively. If nothing else, it will let Mewtwo go. It'll take down Mewtwo with it, an offensive Mewtwo, for example. So it'll ensure that. Oh, the EVs, by the way. I don't think there's a such thing as correct Wob EVs. You generally like special defense because you like taking Dracos, and this lets you take. You can drop defense and add more HP and make yourself better against like offensive Kyogres. So you can remove them in a pinch if they're locked into a water move. So you can run more defense if you want. It's really up to you. But you generally need to max out your defenses or do as much as possible. And generally you prefer plus special defense or calm than bold, given how especially offensive Ubers is as a tier. So yeah. Oh, and also in that Wi-Fi battle, another nice combination that was on display there that you'll see is like if you have a Deoxys Speed and you can taunt something, and then, because like what's your first instinct when Wob comes in, right? Oh, I better not use an attacking move or it'll KO me. Well, that's why Deoxys Speed is also such a great partner with Wob. You get up your rocks, you taunt something, and then you are able to force the opponent into attacking. So like in that game, then a Groudon was taunted and it had to Earthquake, and that gave Wob a free KO. So, I mean, and another reason why Wob is so good on these offensive teams is that, it's all about not falling far enough behind to where you're, like the worst feeling is when you have a Scarf Dialga and you're so close to cleaning up your opponent's team, but they just have more sacrifices than you because you had a significant Pokemon deficit early on and you weren't able to exert enough offensive pressure to make up for it, and you just come up short. Well, Wob is perfect because, what do you do with a lot of these offensive teams? You get up rocks or hazards early in the game and you probably lose a poke. Maybe you chip the opposing Pokemon, but you lose a poke. And what does Wob do? It evens up the score. So it evens up the score, and it comes back and, probably does it again later. Yeah, have the Calcon handy. You're not going to want to launch it into Latios Draco or stuff like that, but it's generally a great Pokemon to have. Now, what's the second Wob set? Well, you can also potentially force more KOs. Now, if you can get more than one KO with Wob, that's incredible. Getting a 2-for-1 with Wob is unbelievably good. Now, this one's harder to use because you don't have lefties, which is one thing. And as soon as they don't see lefties, then the opponent is going to know that it's this set. But the reason you don't use Destiny Bond on regular Wob is because it's really slow. Well, what happens with Wob most of the time? You're going to take a bunch of hits and you're going to counter-coat them back. And yeah, you'll get the KO, and then maybe you get finished off. And at least you prevent setup because of Encore. The only thing that's going to set up on you is something with Taunt, so the rare Taunt Calm Mind Mewtwo. So, be careful of that. It's something you should be aware of. Most of the time, other stuff isn't setting up on you. But you would love to have Destiny Bond, right? Well, with Custap, it goes hand in hand because Wob literally exists to take hits. And when you take as many hits as Wob does, then you wind up in low HP. And lefties will, only go so far. So sometimes you want to have that option for the last KO. And this is especially useful against a Scarfer. If you haven't removed the Scarfer early on, but against something that is forced to attack, or like a Specs user, let's say, that's more realistic, later in the game, where they're, or like an Outrage locked Pokemon. That's actually a really common one. Like if it's an SD Outrage locked Rayquaza or something, and you have that Wob, that Stealth Rock and Spikes will knock into Custap range, whereas normally it would be useless or relegated to death fodder at best, then here you are able to potentially squeeze another KO out of it with the priority Destiny Bond. So, that's Wob for you. I mean, that's the dream, to counter something and then prio Destiny Bond something after that. That's or countercoat something. But yeah, that's the alternative Wob. So remember, it is going to be, it's not going to be a surprise, and you are going to want to watch out for the lack of lefties. But if you can handle that, again, get some practice with it, then it is a great option. However, this is the main set for a good reason. And again, depends on your team if you're trying to pursue something, and if not, then go with Safeguard. It's the better option. Charm or something isn't really worth it. It's not the same. Encore will just do the same thing but better. So, yeah, use Wob on offense and consult the resources I've mentioned. And honestly, I think that's really all you need. I mean, we'll just go through the list of other Pokemon that can benefit from Wob support. Darkrai, I mean, it's an okay Wob. The nice thing about Darkrai alongside Wob is that when you're using an offensive team, you're all about putting yourself ahead, right? And, Wob forces KOs, and Darkrai effectively also forces KOs through sleep. So it's really great for getting a numerical Pokemon advantage over your opponent. And what's also really nice about the pairing of Darkrai and Wob is that commonly Scarfers are used to revenge kill Darkrai, and what does Wobbuffet remove? Scarfers. Deoxys Speed, we already know, Hazard, and Wob makes up for the deficit, and Deoxys Speed's Taunt forces the opponent to attack and thus makes the Wob trap effort even easier. I mean, Wob generally gets his trap off even when the opponent tries to play around it by not attacking it. I mean, that's why it's so good. I mean, the support Dialga example is the best one. It's going to rock. Okay, well, you either get KO'd or you give something free setup. Something you don't want to give free setup. So, it's not nice to have to switch your Kyogre check out of Kyogre as it Calm Minds. Yikes. So, DOA, it's actually a great Wob partner. Again, Scarfer removal. Scarfer removal. Or, even something like a Choice Band Scizor, it locks into Bullet Punch. Well, okay, Wob, it's gone. So, Dialga, we already went over that, whether it's trapping support sets or what's it called, support sets or scarf sets. I mean, and it's a great pairing with Dialga because it clears out the opponent for Dialga to clean late game scarf sets. So yeah, you could feasibly use it alongside something like Bulk Up Dialga too. I mean, again, lots of options, offensive pokes. Garchomp, Garchomp doesn't really have the scarf issue as much, but it's still nice because Wob lets you remove Lugia, the biggest pain in Garchomp's rear end. And you can also do stuff like remove Lotties, especially alongside Scizor. Or, if you're running Garchomp, then it's probably going to be T-Tar because you want to run Sand. So it's really an even easier pairing. Giratina, well, Wob is good against regular Giratina, the, sub protect sets because it encores through sub, and that can make them a lot less annoying. But not very good against Giratina O at all. But, good support. Groudon, it can check. I mean, the only stuff that can get really hairy is like if it's a question of encoring them into the setup move or, countering like against a Rock Polish Groudon at a certain health. But that's just, the game. And you can potentially make it less of a prediction battle. Like you can, counter enough times that, you don't want to encore on the EQ, obviously. But you can counter enough times that you gain lefties, and then maybe you can take 2, depending. And, maybe you can tickle as a kind of middle ground. So yeah, you can check all sorts of stuff, for Groudon. And of course, the main thing for Wob, of course, is that it removes the annoying walls that would stop Groudon. And with Safeguard, it helps Groudon avoid otherwise debilitating status, mainly T-Spikes, Toxic, and Will-O-Wisp. Ho-Oh, Wob is great. I mean, look, you start off the game with hazards against Ho-Oh lead, and it goes, and then your lead faints, and then you send in Wob after, and you remove. That would be one reason to run defense EVs on Wob, to take less from Ho-Oh. But yeah, so then afterwards you send in Wob and you even up the score, and there's no and it's much better against as an anti-lead Ho-Oh tactic than say Kyogre, because Ho-Oh can switch out and then come back in later, whereas with Wob you are forcing the removal of that Ho-Oh. So yeah, as an anti-lead Ho-Oh measure, it's great. Kyogre, great Kyogre partner, occasional Kyogre remover, but mostly great partner. Latios, try at -2, but as a way of ensuring Latios gets removed, I mean, it's just as good as Scizor. I mean, Scizor doesn't like switching in either. Lugia removes it wonderfully. Manaphy doesn't really have much interaction there. Mewtwo, good check to the offensive sets, if nothing else. I mean, being able to take down Mewtwo with you and ensure that it doesn't take out like your Giratina O while trying to take hits or something, that can be great as well. And it's a great Mewtwo partner because, again, removing Scarfers. Palkia, Wob removes the Scarfers, and it's also, I'm sure it's also a great partner. You generally don't see it as much of a Palkia abuser, but honestly, anything likes being paired with Wobbuffet. Anything likes the forced KOs. I mean, for an offensive Pokemon, that's the dream. That's one less Pokemon they have that can check your remaining Pokemon, and the best part is you get to choose it, and they are unable to escape. You get to choose what Pokemon of theirs you want to remove. I mean, obviously it's not that simple, but it's not always that simple, but in many cases it is. Oh, well, their Pokemon is not able to KO Wobbuffet. That applies in this situation. That applies to a lot. I'm going to send Wob in and KO it. And they can't set up or anything because I'm going to Encore, and then I'll get a free turn, and they don't want that either. So, yeah, Palkia is just a nice partner. Or it's more often trapped by Wob, but I mean, it also fits on Wob teams. Because what do you want at the end of the game? A Pokemon that can clean up after Wob has wreaked havoc on the opposing team. And if Scarf Dialga can do it, Palkia can do it. So, Ray, classic Wob partner. It removes the walls. It prevents status from being used. It allows easy setup. I mean, that's another deadly combo I didn't even mention. Like, if they use a status move, then Wob can Encore them into the status move. If they use a status move on Wob, so yeah, I mean, that's I can't believe I didn't mention that specifically until now. I think I only implied it. Yeah, specifically, if they're not going to attack Wob, they're going to try and use a status move on it, right? And then you Encore them into that status move, and yeah, Wob's going to be status, but then you Safeguard, and they're locked into the status move, and then you switch to your setup thing, and complete free setup, and, voila, we know what it does by this point. So, you lock that Lugia into Toxic, and even if you don't have, even if you don't have what's it called, tickle, then afterwards you safeguard, and then you switch to your Rayquaza, and the Ray check is switching out of Ray as it boosts, and Havoc is being wreaked, and all that. Just as an example, because again, Lugia doesn't run Toxic too often. Not that it's bad or anything, but and you shouldn't count on it not running it, but that's just an example. So either way, whether you're safeguarding and abusing the Toxic Lock Lugia, or you're tickling it and pursuing it to death, then dangerous. Mence, I mean, if there was a good way to run the Ray Mence duo, Wob is kind of cool because on offensive teams that don't really do much in the way of, like, you want to run a lot of offensive sluggers together, and they're really offensively potent, but they're not much in the way of switching into opposing attacks, and you're like, all right, Kyogre or Latios or Palkia is in, and I kind of got to sack something now. And Wob kind of splits the difference because with those teams, it's always like, all right, I'm going to sack something, and then I'm going to throw in my own offensive Pokemon, and ideally that will force a KO in return, and therefore I will be able to win in the end game. However, you're not always able to guarantee that your offensive response after you've lost something is able to grab that KO. With Wob, you force that KO afterwards. It's a big difference between, all right, now I'm going to threaten my own Draco Meteor. Yeah, it's probably going to KO something, but not always. And with Wob, it's not that at all, because you're like, all right, they are getting KO'd now, guaranteed. So it's really, really great. And yeah, it's wonderful in all these scenarios we've mentioned. And the OU pokes, I mean, Blissey Destroyer, of course, Bronzong Destroyer. It outruns Bronzong, one of the few Pokemon it outruns, which is nice. I've even seen it, abuse Fortress. It's like, oh no, all the spikes. Oh, well, Rayquaza got a free turn. That's not good. So, where's the other one? Oh, Latios, of course. Same deal as Latios, except easier to trap. What was the one I was thinking of? Scizor? Yeah, Scizor. Oh, it's a great Luke partner, of course, because locking them into a move, and you don't even have to set up Safeguard for Luke to set up on Toxic, for example. So even better, and yeah, so just such a great Pokemon. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to mention about Wob. Yeah, I mean, it's a simple poke, but it is unique and it is excellent. It is not used nearly enough as it should be, and it has so many useful applications that I really want to see more of it. And I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about Wob. So I will thank you guys for watching. I hope you got something out of this. Oh yeah, Shiny Wob is pretty awesome. So yeah. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you are inspired to get out there and use Wob. So I will catch you next time.